back of the rim. Got it! Oh, the slam! Oh, here's a Curry way downtown. Oh, what a shot from Curry!
The first time I took interest in the NBA had a lot to do with this rapid scoring machine that went by the name of Tracy McGrady, T-Mac. 6'8", 7'2" wingspan, and offensive skills that rivaled that of Kobe Bryant's at the time. And when at his best, he at least looked as if he had the potential to become the greatest scorer of all time. But you would not have known that by the way his first couple of seasons unfolded. That seemed to justify, at least for the moment, his 9th overall draft position. However, by the early 2000s, he'd become a far better player than 7 of the guys taken before him, and it left some fan bases scratching their heads as to why they were being torched by him instead of cheering for him on their own teams. So, how did a guy who was drawing Scottie Pippen comparisons fall so far in the '97 NBA draft? And how did the careers of those taken before him turn out? If SeatGeek was around back then, you could have seen up close how miserable some of these guys were compared to T-Mac. SeatGeek is the amazing app that provides you with the easiest way to buy tickets for almost any kind of event, which would most likely be sports related for you all. The app pulls tickets from all over the web and has them in one place to make purchasing one for your event really easy, and it also assures you'll be getting the best value for your ticket. While searching for your tickets, each one is ranked with a score from 1 to 100 that lets you know if you're getting a good deal or not for your purchase. On top of that, the app also provides you with the detailed view of what you would see from your seat before you even get there, which is extremely helpful. If you're interested in downloading this app, the links will be in both the comment section and highlighted in the description. If you're still on the fence, consider using my promo code DOM2K to get $20 off your first purchase. First, a brief explanation of how 7 teams decided that McGrady's potential wasn't enough for them, and how one of those franchises overlooked him twice. As you well know by now, McGrady was another prospect that jumped straight from high school, and this draft took place directly after Kobe's, so franchises still weren't optimistically betting top picks on a high school kid. Kobe had a very subpar rookie year, the kind that a team in desperate need of help wouldn't have been able to tolerate. So, what sense would it have made to hedge that same bet on T-Mac if you just come off of a 30-win season? However, that's not all there is to it this time. Colleges were very interested in him after his final year of high school, where he became a McDonald's All-American, led Mount Zion to the number 2 ranking in the country, and won the National Player of the Year title. His numbers for that season were 28 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, and 3 steals per game. So with it being very obvious that he was standing out from his age group, he had his selection of any major program he wanted, and he was reportedly close to committing to the Kentucky Wildcats. However, that dominant performance also attracted the attention of NBA franchises, where word got out that he was projected as a potential first-round pick in a draft that didn't have that many surefire selections. Teams weren't just interested, however, they were ready to make drastic moves for him. Once he declared for the draft, Jerry Krause of the Chicago Bulls was basically drooling over the prospect of bringing him on board to move into the new era. Remember from my Bulls video that while Chicago's dynasty was wrapping up, Krause was concerned with limiting the amount of time between their last championship with that core and the next one with a brand new team. He saw that potential in McGrady and tried to trade Scottie Pippen to the Grizzlies for their number 4 pick, where he would have taken him. Just one problem. Michael Jordan made it clear that if they went that route in trading Pippen, he would call it a career and retire. That means Jerry Reinsdorf was 100% correct when he said Jordan could give a damn about what happened to that team after he was gone. So the deal didn't happen, but if it had've, Jordan and the Bulls would have only won 5 titles, and McGrady would have taken the baton from there. Jerry Krause was not the only one licking his chops though, as Jerry West was on the prowl again as well. Just 1 year after stealing Kobe in the draft, he had McGrady work out for the Lakers, where he became convinced that he wanted to do whatever was necessary to get him in the draft. That would have put Kobe and T-Mac on opposite wings of the Lakers offense with Shaq down low. My mind kind of explodes imagining that this was even a possibility, but with Kobe's ego and wanting to prove himself, next to his eventual feud with Shaq, I'm not 100% sure where McGrady could have fit into those plans. Jerry Buss and the Lakers general manager did not like that idea either, as it likely would have cost them Eddie Jones, and they felt they already had a big challenge trying to incorporate one high school kid into a championship team. So it looks like McGrady would have wound up a 4th pick at best, but since neither deal happened, here's what these 7 other franchises missed out on. For one very rare time in these videos, a team struck gold as San Antonio selected Tim Duncan with the first overall pick, definitely in contention for the best first pick of all time. Not only did Duncan have one of the greatest careers ever, but he literally started producing at a superstar level the year he was drafted, which isn't something you would have expected from McGrady or really any player that young. Duncan averaged 21 points, 12 rebounds, and 3 blocks on 55% shooting as a rookie. On top of that, he finished 5th in MVP voting and became the first rookie since Larry Bird in 1980 to be selected to the All-NBA first team. It's literally one of the most dominant rookie seasons ever, and the Spurs finished with nearly 60 wins, so I don't think any rookie will be topping this anytime soon unless Zion really is Jesus. On top of drafting one of the best players in history, they also drafted one of the best team guys. Duncan routinely took pay cuts to make the Spurs roster possible, which is a huge reason they transitioned from his era the way that they have. He was very coachable, so the rest of the team accepted Popovich's methods, and there was literally zero drama surrounding him in his 19-year-long career with the same team. He became a 15-time All-Star, 2-time MVP, helped bring in 5 titles. There's just literally nothing more the Spurs could have asked of him other than to make that layup in Game 7 of the 2013 NBA Finals. I could go on for days about Duncan's accomplishments in the NBA, but for the purposes of this video, I think we're all familiar enough with the big guy. T-Mac became a great player, but it was for a limited time, and he would not have brought any of the same mystique to the Spurs franchise, although he came insanely close to profiting off their success in 2013 when he was riding the bench. However, the Sixers would have heavily benefited from taking him with the second pick to pair with Iverson. Instead, they selected Keith Van Horn, who was actually seen as the other sure thing aside from Duncan. Van Horn consistently averaged 21 points and 9 rebounds through 4 years in college, and won the Western Athletic Conference Player of the Year award 3 straight times. On top of that, in a time where this wasn't even a thing yet, he was a 6'10" forward shooting 40% from 3 in college. These days that's a dime a dozen, but in 1997 that was probably seen as a rarity. So I guess I see why he was so valuable in that draft, but it didn't quite turn into the sure thing type of career that was projected. As a matter of fact, the Sixers didn't even keep him. They traded him to New Jersey on draft night in a mega deal that Philly GM Billy King called the largest trade in team history. It brought them a lot of players, but mainly the 7th pick, which was Tim Thomas. We'll get to that. It was a mistake for them to have cut Van Horn loose though, as he actually put together a really decent career where he averaged 20 points and 7 rebounds right out of the gate. And he would have been a great offensive help next to Iverson. So he shot 36% from 3 in his career, was a valuable role player for many years with the Nets, and pretty much hit the biggest shot in their franchise's history when he knocked down the 3 that sent them to the 2002 NBA Finals. However, after being slapped by the Lakers, they shipped him off to Philly, which started the phase of his career where he was productive, but basically a bargaining chip. He bounced around to 4 different teams in the mid to early 2000s, and after the 2006 season, he apparently took a year off to spend with family. That became a situation where he would never return to the NBA, although he did sign a contract with the Mavericks a year later to help them secure Jason Kidd. But he didn't play a single game of it, and was out of the league by 30 years old. According to him in a 2017 interview, he needed to provide stability for his family and couldn't do so with the NBA's lifestyle. So he quite literally called it quits in the NBA to be a better family man. And before we leave this section, I have to mention that with his numbers in the 2000s, he would have probably flourished today. A 6'10" power forward that could knock down threes. If he did well then, at least on the offensive side, there's no way he wouldn't be more valuable today. The Sixers missed a chance to pair Tracy McGrady with Allen Iverson, and seeing as how they took one of the worst rosters in finals history to meet the Lakers in 2001, I think they would have welcomed an explosive wing scorer to help them out. AI had a lot of problems off the court that were ultimately the undoing of his career though, so nobody can guarantee he and T-Mac would have been a hit, but sign me up for 2 of the biggest basketball icons of the 2000s playing together please. The Boston Celtics selected Chauncey Billups at the 3rd spot, and ultimately traded him to the Raptors just 51 games through his rookie season. Billups has got one of the weirdest careers ever because he goes on to become a great point guard in the mid to late 2000s, but it just started off so incredibly slow. He played for 6 teams in the first 6 years of his career, didn't make an all-star team until nearly a decade after he was drafted, And for some reason I've never figured out after the Kevin Garnett video, teams just would not commit to him long term. Boston gave up on him super early despite taking him with a top 3 pick, and Billups says that that was a recipe for disaster anyways because he did not get along with head coach Rick Pitino. It's also on record that the Celtics didn't know whether to use him as a 1 or a 2, but damn, still, why give up so soon? He was doing decent. The Raptors kicked him away to Denver. Denver frisbeed him to Orlando where he didn't play due to injury, and at that time he was considered a bust although he'd actually been decent with his time on the court. So it was true he could have been better as a 3rd pick in his first few years, but clearly he had potential if he could just grow somewhere for a little, and that's exactly what he did in Minnesota during a very troubled time in his career. While playing there, he took to the mentorship of Kevin Garnett, Sam Mitchell, and some other guys. That made him a much better point guard as he had somewhat of a breakout year after their starting point guard went down with a knee injury. And it seemed things were going upwards from there. He wanted to come back to the Wolves that summer, but they wanted to see how Terrell Brandon, the original starting point guard, would return from his seriously injured knee. And if you watch my Kevin Garnett video from around a month ago, you know full well how ridiculous it is that they did that instead of going all out to keep Billups with Garnett. Anyways, their loss. He goes on to Detroit to win Finals MVP and makes a very successful career up until his retirement. So that could literally be its own video because he went from being called a bust to a Finals MVP, and I just don't think that's happened since him, nor will that probably ever happen again. That was Boston's first time passing up on Tracy McGrady, but seeing as how his career started slow, they might have just flipped him halfway through the same way they did Billups. Plus, they didn't even have Pierce yet, and as you'll see, that very likely would have been the end of things. The Vancouver Grizzlies, who were almost home to Scottie Pippen, used the 4th pick to select Antonio Daniels, who I have exactly one memory of in the NBA. Roll it.
Eastern Conference is just throw the cards up in the air right now.
Oh, Allen Iverson, what a move! Allen Iverson.
Allen Iverson move.
I don't think there's been a cross this disrespectful since it happened. I mean, Wesley Johnson's was pretty bad, but to get crossed while you're already crossed, fam, you cannot even do this in 2K yet. This just wasn't a very good pick. He had an amazing senior year at Bowling Green State University, averaging 24 points, 7 assists, and 2 steals while becoming the Mid-American Conference Player of the Year, but it never came close to translating in the pros although he had a long career. He was just a journeyman with no real notable moments, except for the Iverson cross, and he played for 7 teams until 2011 where he finished with the Sixers, ironically. And just like Kobe Bryant, I am not going down the dark path of imagining McGrady's career starting in Vancouver. Next, to round out the top 5, Denver took Tony Battie, who also had a very pedestrian career. He was a big man that showed promise in his final year at Texas Tech, but he never really made a mark on any of the 6 NBA teams he played on. The most memorable thing about him for me is that I got to see a moving truck outside of his house when he played for the Magic and was traded in the deal for Vince Carter. Yeah, for a very short time in my childhood, I lived right across the street from Tony Battie, literally like a few weeks because I moved out there in the beginning of July and he was traded at the very end of June. I mean, it was fascinating to see the effects of a trade in real life cause I was a basketball junkie and all that, but yeah, that's my Tony Battie career highlight. The Nuggets were just 1 year removed from the Mutombo era during this draft, so they could have probably benefited from picking up McGrady and starting over, but they dumped Battie literally after his rookie year in a deal for Nick Van Exel, so T-Mac probably suffers a similar fate. The Celtics had one last shot to add McGrady with the 6th overall pick, and instead went with Ron Mercer, who I have exactly one memory of. Roll it.
Oakley to Mercer. Mercer on the run. Oh, my God! What a play! What a defensive play! A 2-hand block, steal, game, set, match. You're trying to foul.
Yeah, I mean, being owned by Michael Jordan is hardly a bad thing to be remembered for because it's happened to the best of them. Also, he wasn't even a bad player for a while. He was an All-American in college and an All-Southeastern Conference player at Kentucky. Speaking of Kentucky, that's how he ended up in Boston. Rick Pitino had just become the head coach of the Celtics, and Antoine Walker, who was also on the '96 Kentucky championship team, had been drafted to Boston a year earlier. So, to convince other teams he had no interest in drafting his former player, Pitino stated that he believed Mercer didn't have the talent to be selected so high. That helped him slide to 6, and that's where Boston nabbed him in apparent efforts to bring Kentucky guys together. Mercer averaged a fairly inefficient 17 points a game through his first 5 seasons, but he still had a lot of apparent talent and potential. However, his game took a very steep decline when he was traded to Indiana, where he was merely a reserve. That was his 5th team by that point. The trades originally started when Boston decided he was expendable because they'd picked up Paul Pierce, and then he just kind of became good trade bait in multiple deals. His career is very perplexing though, because he was an insane prospect out of high school, did well in college, showed his value in the NBA, then he was just out of the league by 28 years old. As the great prophet J. Cole put it, "Lord, please let my problems disappear like Ron Mercer." If that does not sum this up, I don't know what does. So Boston was done with both of their top 6 picks within 2 years and literally chose Paul Pierce over Mercer. I'd lament the Celtics passing on McGrady twice, but I just don't see a situation where he lasts long term there. Tim Thomas comes in at 7th, and he was traded to Philly in the deal mentioned earlier. And then Philly got tired of waiting for him to show his worth in just his 2nd year, so they shipped him off to Milwaukee. The Bucks thought he had great potential after a playoff run, so they tossed him a bag, and Ray Allen was even quoted saying that if Thomas wanted to, he could be the best player in the league. Ray has always been a nice guy. The most interesting part of his career though is where he's knocked out of a playoff series due to injury from a flagrant foul by Jason Collins. He was pretty pissed about the situation, telling the media he just wanted to get healthy and back into the series so he could hit somebody. Also from that situation, he wound up calling Kenyon Martin a fake tough guy, saying that technical fouls and fines did not make him tough. The crazy part about this was that as late as 2017, Thomas was trying to set up a boxing match between him and Martin to settle that beef. The flagrant incident that triggered his anger happened in the year 2004, so yeah, there's some bad blood there. He had a decent 3-year stretch in his career, but never became the superstar Ray Allen thought he could. And for the final spot, the player selected before Tracy McGrady, the Golden State Warriors selected Adonal Foyle. Yes, if you're following along in these vids, the Warriors passed on T-Mac and Kobe in back-to-back years. This one is hilarious though. PJ Carlesimo was pretty secure in the decision to select Foyle over McGrady. First off, the Warriors needed size and shot blocking down low, so obviously McGrady did not fit that bill. Although Foyle barely did either, as he only averaged 5 rebounds through his 10-year stint with the Warriors. He did block 2 shots a game though. Carlesimo said he had no doubts T-Mac would become a great player, but that a 28-win team did not have time to wait on him to be that. Fair point, but they may as well have gone that route considering how it turned out with Foyle. He also alluded to the fact that Foyle's NCAA block record at the time totaled more than what Tim Duncan and Alonzo Mourning had accomplished. Adonal Foyle up there with the greats, man. So yeah, basically he was high on this guy being their answer down low. And this was a year after the Warriors had selected Todd Fuller for that same reason, so they struck out on a possible Kobe Bryant and Tracy McGrady duo trying to fill a void in the paint. But they did have Latrell Sprewell and Chris Mullin at the time, so I suppose they weren't looking to build a perimeter duo. This all led to the Raptors, who were more than happy to take McGrady with the 9th overall pick. And although it was a very bumpy start due to his problems with the first coach and his body not quite being NBA ready, he started to show his potential next to Vince Carter as early as the 2000 season. McGrady has since stated that he regrets leaving Toronto, saying he and Carter could have been special. However, he opted for Orlando, which was not only close to home, but apparently building something great between him, Grant Hill, and Tim Duncan. That completely fell apart, as did McGrady's career due to injuries in the mid to late 2000s. He had reached such a high point in his career before those injuries that he admits he considered performance-enhancing drugs to return to that level. That obviously didn't happen, and the bad luck in his career reached all-time highs where he came within moments of becoming an NBA champion with the 2013 Spurs, only to see it crumble in one of the least likely ways possible. Although I do not know how much he would have valued a ring that he rode the bench for. I don't care. As someone who was brought into basketball by T-Mac, I would have been more than happy to put champion next to his name. So with the way his career went from start to finish, I'm not really sure any of these teams regret not taking him. Again, there weren't any really sure things in the draft aside from Keith Van Horn and Tim Duncan, so it kinda seemed like teams were just taking players that they might have needed for a position, or trying to avoid taking a high school kid, and that's how you ended up with so many players that just became role players or really had no notable moments in the NBA. It also seems like his slow start probably would have gotten him traded for most of these teams, because that's what they did when a lot of these didn't work out. Part of T-Mac's early struggles was the coaching, but he also didn't really start to break out until he hit the gym one summer and added something to his frame. Also, his injuries later on in his career would have probably screwed these teams' plans, so again, not sure how much they regret it. Nevertheless, it's always fascinating to see how many of these all-time great talents fell to very pedestrian numbers in the NBA draft.